Peace to everybody. This is about the 13 most shocking things discovered in the Titanic wreckage. And of course, as you know, Titanic went down in 1912 because of an iceberg that Titanic had hit, and people thought that she was going to be unstoppable or whatever, or indestructible, but unfortunately, it wasn't. And of course, as you can see here, is the Titanic herself. Though the RMS Titanic sank on April 14, 1912, the remains of the famed ship weren't discovered until 1985 on the bottom of the ocean floor off the coast of Newfoundland in Canada. And while much of the ship has naturally perished sitting under the sea for decades, divers were still able to rescue and preserve plenty of artifacts. Wonder what surprising things survived the wreckage? Well, to quote Britney Spears' discography, we went down and got it for you. And of course, yes, April 14th, 1912, that's when the Titanic had sank. The remains of the famed ship weren't discovered until 1985 on the bottom of the ocean floor off the coast of Newfoundland in Canada. So in Canada, that's when the Titanic was discovered, of being underneath on the ocean floor. And while much of the ship had naturally perished sitting up under the sea for decades, so it was so many years that the Titanic was sitting on the ocean floor for decades at a time. And of course, the divers were still able to rescue and preserve plenty of artifacts, because there was a lot of artifacts that were preserved after a while when they found a lot of things. And it was just plenty of them. Number one, we got the violin played as the ship sank, and of course, this is the violin that was found on the ocean floor. While an old violin being found among the wreckage of the Titanic isn't necessarily shocking, its backstory is. According to CNN, the decaying violin was the very one that band leader Wallace Hartley used to play Nearer, My God, to Thee. As the ship sank, it sold for $1.7 million during a UK auction in 2013. So this is the violin that was found on the ocean floor. Even though it wasn't necessarily to find it, but the backstory it does have for it. And of course, the decaying violin was the very one that band leader Wallace Hartley. So Mr. Hartley had played this violin as the Titanic was going to sink in 1912, and it did so for $1 million during a UK auction in 2013. The bell rung to warn of the iceberg is number two. And as you can see here are the bells that was found on the ocean floor. The bell from the crow's nest of the Titanic was recovered in the 1985 expedition and is currently a collection piece on display at the Titanic Museum in Massachusetts. It's the same bell that was rung 3 times by lookout Frederick Fleet in an attempt to warn the ship that an iceberg was ahead. So this bell here was to warn the people of an iceberg, and of course it was run 3 times by Frederick Fleet, who happened to be in the crow's nest of the Titanic. And then this bell was to warn everybody of an iceberg, even the captain himself. A menu of the ship's last meal is number 3, and look how this is the menu that was found. A menu of the last meal served on the Titanic to first-class passengers was auctioned off in 1912, selling for $83,000. According to the BBC, the meal was served the same day the ship crashed into the glacier, and it featured several courses, including eggs, argentino, I don't know, consomme femur, and chicken a la Maryland. So this is the menu that was for the first class passengers only, because the third class and the second class were not allowed on the onto the dinner for the first meal class, so they had to stay below the ship. Sheet music played by ill-fated musicians, and of course this is the music sheet itself. Despite being submerged in the ocean for 73 years, divers recovered a piece of sheet music for the song "Put Your Arms Around Me, Honey" from the 1910 Broadway production of Madame Sherry. It was played by the doomed musicians on the sinking ship, according to the Dothan Eagle. Since being recovered, the sheet music had been on display at several Titanic exhibits, most recently in Atlanta, Georgia. So this sheet music was played by the band that as the ship was sinking. And of course, this one, the most recently, this sheet music was at its Titanic exhibit in Atlanta, Georgia. A letter written on Titanic stationery the day before the shipwreck is number 5. And as you can see here, here's the letter, the pen itself. Also surviving the wreckage was a letter written by first-class passenger Oscar Hoverton, written to his mother the day before the ship sank. The letter was found folded up in a notebook in a Hoverton's pocket. It is the only letter written on the Titanic stationery to have actually survived going into the North Atlantic. Andrew Aldridge, an auctioneer and valuer at the UK auction house Henry Aldridge and Son, told History. In 2014, the auction house sold the letter for $166,000. So Oscar Hoverton had wrote a letter to his mother that the day before the ship sank. I guess he wanted, I'm not sure what the letter has said or anything, but I guess maybe he was trying to tell his mother if he doesn't come back, this is goodbye, maybe. I don't know, but this is the letter that was folded up in his notebook in Hoverton's pocket. So, and of course, it sold for $166,000. A pocket watch stuck in at the time the ship sank, and of course, this is the pocket watch at the time the ship sank, and it's a beautiful watch, a pocket watch at that. The pocket watch of one of the Titanic's victims was also found in the wreckage. As reported by the Telegraph, the rusty watch was owned by passenger John Chapman, who was traveling with his wife Lizzie. What makes this so unique is the fact that it's literally frozen in time. The artifact is stuck at 1:45 a.m., which is around the time the ship became submerged underwater. So John Chapman had this beautiful pocket watch. He was traveling with his wife Lizzie, and this watch is so unique. It is the fact that it's literally frozen in time, because it froze at 1:45 a.m. as the ship was submerged underwater. So a lot of stuff was a lot of stuff just sank down to the ocean floor, and this beautiful watch happens to be one of them as well. A fur coat worn by a stewardess who survived the shipwreck, and of course here's the beautiful fur coat that one of the stewardess had wore as who survived the shipwreck. A floor-length beaver fur coat found in the Titanic wreckage was worn by first-class stewardess Mabel Bennett, who, according to the Telegraph, was given the coat to wear after she was found waiting for a lifeboat clad in only a nightgown, as one of the only fully intact pieces of clothing to survive the shipwreck. It sold at auction for around $165,000 in 2017. Bennett, who was 33 when the ship sank, survived that night. She later died at 96 in 1974, making her the longest living female member of the Titanic crew. So Mabel Bennett wore this coat because she was only wearing, and this is a floor-length beaver coat she was wearing. She was waiting for a lifeboat clad in only a nightgown, and of course she had to have the beaver coat because she didn't really want nothing to happen to it. So she was going for a lifeboat, and of course she was the only one who survived, but she later died at 96 in 1974, making her the longest living female member of the Titanic crew. So she pretty much outlived everybody on the Titanic. A bronze cherub from the grand staircase's upper landing. And as you can see, here is the beautiful cherub that was from the grand staircase's upper landing. One bronze cherub statue, a decoration from the upper landing of the Titanic's grand staircase, was also recovered in 1985. However, the statue is missing its left foot, likely due to the fact that it was ripped from its post as the ship sank. So this is the cherub statue, and it's a beautiful statue at that. As the passengers went up or came down from the grand staircase, you would see this statue. And it doesn't matter which way the passengers went up the staircase, because once you go up, you could either go to the right or to the left, and you would see this beautiful statue. But unfortunately, due to the fact that it was ripped from its post as the ship sank, so it was missing a foot, a left foot. Keys to access lifeboat lanterns is number 9, and as you can see here are the keys to the lifeboat lanterns. These keys recovered from the wreckage aren't just any old keys. They were used by crewman Samuel Hemming during the sinking of the ship to unlock a door behind which a stock of lifeboat lanterns were waiting. The keys themselves played a part in the story, as they were actually used in those last desperate hours. Aldridge told the Irish Times, "This is because Mr. Hemming received a personal order from Captain Edward J. Smith as the ship was sinking, and it became apparent all was lost to ensure all of the lifeboats were provided with lamps." So Mr. Hemming had these keys in his possession during the sinking of the ship to unlock a door. And of course, Captain Edward J. Smith, he was ordered Mr. Hemming to grab the lanterns for the lifeboats. And as the ship was sinking and it became apparent all was lost, to ensure all of the lifeboats were provided with lamps. So all the lifeboats had to be provided with these lamps, and this is why the keys were Mr. Hemming had in his possession at the time. A vest worn by a third-class passenger, and of course this is that a third-class person had wore this vest. Another piece of clothing recovered from the wreckage was the vest of William Henry Allen, a third-class passenger on the ship. The black wool vest was sold in a collection by Jersey's auctioneers in 2012, nearly a century after the tragedy occurred. So this is supposed to be a black wool vest, but really doesn't look like it because this one is purple. So I guess they must have switched it or something. It all depends. And of course you got the bow tie right there. And I mean, this is a beautiful vest, but this vest was worn by William Henry Allen, and he was a third-class passenger on the ship. And a bracelet engraved with the name of a third-class passenger. And of course, this is a gorgeous bracelet. I love the look of it. It's beautiful. It has pearls and everything else that you could think of. Out of the wreckage of the Titanic also came a woman's 15-karat rose gold and silver bracelet with the name Amy encrusted in diamonds. In her 1998 book, Titanic, Women and Children First, Judith Geller, former director of merchandising for the Titanic expedition, suggests that it might have belonged to Amy Stanley, a third-class passenger and one of the only Amy's on board. So this is a 15-karat rose gold and silver bracelet, and it's beautiful. It has with the name Amy encrusted in diamonds, and of course, you know, I doubt very much if you could see the diamonds in here, but it was encrusted in diamonds with her name in it. Judith Geller, former director of merchandising for the Titanic expedition, suggests that it might have belonged to Amy Stanley. So it could have belonged to her a long time ago. Nobody's sure that if it did or not. But this bracelet is gorgeous, and I love it. I love the look of it and everything. Got the hearts, got the pearls and everything. A pair of gloves that survived the wreckage is number 12, and of course, as you can see here are the gloves that survived the Titanic. A degraded, battered pair of white cotton gloves were also found in the wreckage, and they have since been dubbed some of the rarest Titanic artifacts ever, recovered according to USA Today. The gloves have been put on display in various Titanic expeditions since they were found, but in 2016 they were returned to a conservation facility for permanent retirement. So this was a white cotton gloves that were found in the wreckage, and these gloves are beautiful, but we don't know which passenger had worn it. It might have been a third-class passenger, or who knows what else, or whoever it was on the ship that night. The gloves have been put on display in various Titanic expeditions since they were found, so they have been all over the place, these gloves. They were returned to a conservation facility for permanent retirement, so they got returned back to that place for retirement after they had been on display all over the place. And last but not least, of course, and perfume bottles that were meant for a new life in America. And of course, these are the perfume bottles that were being brought over to America, but unfortunately, it didn't make it all the way to America because it sank as well with the other artifacts. When German-born chemist Adolf Salford Field, or Feld, whichever, boarded the Titanic, he did so with a satchel full of various perfume bottle samples, all of which were found in the ship's records. Salfield, a first-class passenger, had intended to open his own fragrance shop in America, a dream he sadly never realized. And for more on things of the past that we've lost, here are 45 historical sites that no longer exist, but we're not going to get into that one. So there was a German-born chemist. His name was Adolf Salfeld. He boarded the Titanic. He did so with a satchel full of various perfume bottles. And of course, he was going to bring them to America. And he was going to open up his own shop. But of course, it's a dream he sadly never realized. He was going, because as much as anything else, everything sank with it as well. All the artifacts, and of course the perfume bottles that he was going to have a fragrance shop with, but it did not happen because of the Titanic was sinking that night. And a lot of people really didn't realize until it was too late that the Titanic was sinking in 1912. And a lot of people have died that night. Of course, some people survived, but of course, as the years went by, they have passed away as well. And these artifacts, all 13 of these artifacts, are what was recovered from the wreckage of the Titanic herself. Leave your comments below. I am out.